Yeah. What's up, everybody? We got something special planned right now. We got the one and only Adam Lopez coming on. Pretty excited. I haven't seen this cat for a while, and he's doing big things. He's doing real big things. So it's the first time bringing anybody on. So try to set up the split screen, have a nice interview and a conversation for everybody to check out. Yeah,
There he is.
Mr. Adam Lopez.
What's up, man?
You know what, man? We were to everybody there's only a few people here right now, Adam, and I know that it may take a while for some people to filter in,
Right.
but for anybody that's just showing up now, I just briefly talked to Adam. We talked a little bit. I don't want to go too deep because I wanted everybody to get to see kind of how he started, where he started at, and we'll talk a little bit about how I know Adam and our friendship. But at the same time, man, I have so many questions for you. So I'll just start off with Adam and I have known each other for how many years, Adam, have we known each other?
Oh man, since we were 6 or 7 years old, so almost 40 years.
Oh,
That's
man.
that's weird to say, but yeah, almost 40 years, like darn close. 30,
Yeah.
37, 38 years.
Yep. So we played baseball together. We
Yep.
skateboarded together. We went to Lincoln and then Rancho.
Yeah, dude, I'm at the skate park right now. I just got done skating.
Oh, that's so awesome. I was totally going to ask. I was like, gosh, we used to skateboard together. What?
Yeah.
So that is awesome to me, Adam. I want to just start off by asking you this. And as we move through our lives, people's lives change, their passions change. However, you are one of the only people I know that has apparently continued to skateboard like me, but also you've really worked on your craft as far as being a musician and you stuck with it and you've had some big gains. So how does that journey change for you? Like how did it go from the beginning to where you are now?
Man, that's a interesting question. I'm not even sure I know the answer. Um, like you talk about like all the changes that people go through and stuff. And I've gone through a lot of change, but I'm doing the same exact things that bring me enjoyment as now at 44 that I was doing when I was 5 years old. Like basically, it seems like everything I learned about what I liked, I learned by the time I was five, and then I just kept doing them. So
Man,
I guess I found a way to, to get paid to do it so that I could keep doing it. And that was the goal.
you know what? That might be the best definition of success I've ever heard.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at now is learning to appreciate and recognize what I didn't recognize for a long time. Like I thought I was maybe not growing up and not doing like real life stuff, but now I realize that I've had it pretty good all along. Like I've been really lucky, super fortunate.
Yeah, I heard a quote one time that said, your first 40 years is the experience you get, and then the next 40 years is you interpreting that experience. And when you say that, you know, I think one of the greatest things that people can do is to see themselves the way other people see them. We all of us tend to be critical of ourselves. Oh, am I doing this right? Am I not growing up? Or am I being irresponsible? But the truth is, it doesn't really matter what other people think about you. It matters what you think about you. And
Right, right.
uh,
Yeah, there's a quote about it's not your business what other people think of you. I love that, and I wrote a song about that actually,
uh, okay,
and it's kind of silly, but I wrote it anyway.
yeah. Why wouldn't you, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this leads up to something that I've always wondered about. I think all of us inside are an aspiring artist. Some of us are able to really coax out the part of us that is an artist. How is it that you find inspiration to write music, and how is it that you decide to translate that inspiration into action?
the best explanation that I've like heard somebody else describe it as is from Bill Withers, who passed away recently. And he was really a matter-of-fact dude. So when somebody asked him basically the same thing, he said, sometimes things just cross your mind. And that's it. Like, uh, everything I write comes from observing or living through it, or somebody else I know went through something. Um, and I feel like I can relate, even if I haven't experienced it. So on some level, I can understand or relate to it. So if I write about it, then maybe somebody else can relate or understand and either identify with it or at least have empathy or sympathy for somebody else that goes through that. So I don't have a direct answer. Like, it just happens. I don't do it. It kind of just comes through me.
Yeah, it's it's always fascinating to hear people talk about the creative process and how it seems to me that people have a unique process to go through. However, there's usually an underlying similarity in that they are translating an emotion. You know what I mean by that? Like they've been inspired, or like you said, you've seen something happen, whether it's empathy or sympathy, and you're able to somehow express that in the music, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like the the best way to get there is just to let it happen. Like, get out of the way.
Right.
So don't tell yourself you can't do it or that it's not your thing or you wish you could do that, because I think you know everybody has a heartbeat. So music is in all of us. Like, that's your backbeat everywhere you go. You've got it. Um, where I'm doing it, where I'm coming from personally is I just love it that much, and I grew up in it. Like, a lot of my family are musicians. When we were playing baseball and we were 6, 7 years old, like on the weekends, I might be playing at a party with my uncle's band.
Ah, I
You know
see.
what I mean? So for me, it's different in the regard that, like, I'm more of like a historian or musicologist. Like, I know my history and I study it and I love it, and I do. That's the part that's for me. Like, that's fun.
Right.
And then the creative stuff is my way of sharing whatever good feeling I get with other people, so that hopefully they have it too. You know,
Yeah.
and I don't think everybody needs to go that deep and devote their life to it or whatever, but um, everybody's an artist, whether they know it or not.
Yeah. So I didn't know that about your family. Does everybody play guitar? Does one play drums and one plays like the saxophone, or how did that break down?
Like, on my mom's side of the family, so her brothers, she's got a couple brothers that are musicians, and then their uncles are, like, going back, they're all musicians. My great grandfather was a
Wow.
was a upright bass and percussionist, like in the 40s and 50s, professionally. Um, and then I've heard stories like going back to like the turn of the century, where we have aunts and uncles that, back in the days where the radio was live music,
Yeah.
that we had relatives that's what they did. So
See, this
yeah,
is a. Yeah, I've known you for 37 years, and I'm still finding out new stuff about you. You
yeah,
know that
yeah.
that's awesome. It's I guess you could say it's almost you're genetically predisposed to be a musician,
Yeah, probably. I
right?
mean, I don't know. I don't know what entails that to be true,
Right?
but I mean, like, for the most part, like the travel and the bouncing around from place to place and like all that stuff, for the most part, like, is fun for me. So all the other things that go with being the working musician, I more or less enjoy. Not all of it. Like, I never touch drugs. I'm not much of a.
Right.
I don't drink at all, and
Nice.
and I haven't drank that much over the course of my lifetime. Like, eating on the road's kind of tough if you like to eat clean. Uh, so that part of it is rough, but essentially, like, all that goes with it, because you have to take the good with the bad. So yeah, I think I was pretty well constructed to do this.
Do you remember, Adam, when you got your first guitar? Can you tell us about that?
So before I got my first real one, there was a series of guitars that were toys, but to me they were real.
Right.
Being like 4, 5, 6 years old, and then the first one that I got that I took lessons on, I was like 7. And
Okay.
I totally remember uh, getting it. Was it Oceanside Boulevard? Remember there was a Gemco just before you got to the highway at the bottom
Simcoe.
of the hill?
I do remember that.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. We got it there. Um, and it was $7.
Wow.
And it was missing like two strings. Otherwise, it would have been like $20. And I got that guitar. So that would have been like 1983,
Okay.
82, 83. And then I started taking guitar lessons on South Santa Fe at Bradford's Music.
Nice.
Yeah. I took guitar lessons for 2 or 3 years, then like took a break for a couple of years. And then I went back when I was like 10 or 11 for a couple of years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so when you're at that age taking lessons, is it is it like a one-on-one lesson, or were you kind of jamming a little bit with someone that was instructing you? Or you learning the chemistry of how to play with people, or how do you go from taking lessons to understanding chemistry and playing with someone else?
Well, like prior to that, like I'd spent countless days like in my uncle's garage while his band was practicing, or sitting around the house while he was practicing and trying to like, fake my way along. But
Perfect.
I mean, I had no clue what I was doing really, but I knew that I understood it when I heard it. It's
Wow.
like people with like foreign languages,
Hmm.
right? Like they've never learned it, but they know what people are talking about sometimes.
Right.
So for me, it was just like learning a language.
Right.
But the lessons themselves were like in a tiny cramped little room. Like I don't even know. It wasn't even 10 by 10. It was tiny.
Right.
Just yeah, private teacher. Um, he was trying to show me the fundamentals. But basically, like within a couple of lessons, I think he showed me the most like elementary way to play like Johnny Be Good, Chuck Berry, and
Yeah.
Chuck Berry at that time was my hero.
Was he your hero?
Yeah, at that point he was.
And
Uh, so I mean, he taught me that in 10 minutes, and then I was just like off and running. I could play what I heard in my head and figure it out at that point. And I wasn't the best student after that because he kind of gave me the information too soon.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that. Even though he may have given it to you soon, it kind of helped you develop, like, because you're kind of a rebel anyway, man. I mean, facts here. But it seems that maybe he just gave you the I don't know, like the quarter beat, or he just gave you the first beat, and then you're able to run with it from there.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and luckily, I picked up enough things that I should know, besides what I wanted to know, that later in life, when people started asking me to teach them, I learned everything I would have learned in music school within a few weeks because I knew it. I just didn't know the language of it. So
Right.
teaching other people, I quickly put the language to what I heard or knew in my head to be true. Um, so my students that I started teaching like maybe 30 years after my first lesson, really I learned more from them in a few short weeks than I had learned in lessons, in my childhood. So I was lucky that way.
I've talked to a bunch of teachers, and I've done some teaching myself, and I've always heard, and I would agree with you, that you really don't know something until you can teach it to someone else and have them do it well. And that's when
Yeah.
you know it.
Right.
What so
Yeah.
it sounds like, with Chuck Berry being an early influence, I was going to ask how you decided to play the music that you play, but it sounds like we're getting there by talking about Chuck Berry.
Well, like I'm an only child, but I have a big extended family, and they're all
Right.
musicians, and
Right.
they all have their individual tastes. So I was taught early on what quality music was, what quote unquote real music was, and then taught to listen to more or less everything. Like be open minded, learn what makes certain music, even if you don't like it, learn what makes it good music to somebody else. Try to figure it out. Try to find what it is, because if you want to do this and you want to make a living out of it, you've got to be well rounded and educated. you
Yeah.
know.
So can you help those of us that like if we were just learning for the first time, how would you define quality music, and how would you define what other people like?
Man, that's tough. I just know I was lucky. I was really
Right.
fortunate that what I was given was, I was given the right answer.
Yeah.
And so, um, for me, like, my family was heavily into, American roots music. So, the early, like, Hank Williams and Bob Wills country music, and, all the early rock and roll, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Elvis, all that stuff. Um, all the good,
Yeah.
blues and early blues,
Right.
from the pre-war, like, 30 stuff, to like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and then all the rock music that came. I guess I should also let you know, like, my parents were around when I was young and raised me, but I give a lot, or maybe more, credit to my grandparents for raising me while my parents were off working and doing their thing. And so my grandfather, who was, he's still around actually, but he was definitely like the patriarch of the family. Like, everybody went to him for answers, and he was from Texas. So
Yeah.
when it came to music, like, that was the hub, or the basis for what everything else that we listen to sprang from. And that's a big umbrella.
Yeah. It sounds
Yeah,
like it.
especially if you're born there in the '40s. Like, that's that's where my roots are. You know.
Right. It's interesting to think about, especially it's interesting to think about how different people can be raised and are raised. And I think that, you know, there's a quality of people who were lucky enough to have their grandparents in their house or in their life when they were younger, because as an adult you have kids and you think you got stuff figured out, but you realize when you talk to your mom or your dad about the kids that they're like, oh, listen, you dummy, you don't even know what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And all my friends that were lucky enough to have a grandparent, or whether it's a grandma or grandfather in the house, they seem to be a little wiser than their age, and I think that stems from having that wisdom around. And so it's so let me ask you this one here. You've done quite a bit of traveling. Where
hmm
can you tell us, have you been throughout the nation, or tell us a little bit about some of your touring?
um I guess the music has taken me more or less from New York to California, and most of that has been centered, like, in the Southwest and South, like Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Arizona, New Mexico. Most of it's been down there, but I've seen a good portion of the country, from California to New York and up through Pennsylvania and all that stuff. I haven't been, like, to the far East Coast or anything, but yeah, I've seen the majority of it, I think, at this point. A little bit of Europe, which has been cool.
Nice. What parts of
Yeah.
Europe did you check out?
I made it to Paris once. Uh,
Whoa.
I got to touch the Eiffel Tower and see the Mona
Yeah.
Lisa.
Oh,
Um, I've been to Iceland a number of times, which is pretty cool. And then most of the touring has been, all around, like, toured most of Belgium, I think, and a good portion of the Netherlands. Yeah.
what was it like touring in Europe? What was each country in Europe like a state in the United States, as far as the feeling, kind of a different vibe, a different place, or how would you?
Well, most of it, like I said, most of it, 99% of it's Belgium and the Netherlands.
Right?
Those places are similar, but distinctly different. Like Vista and Oceanside, like, they're, similar but not quite. Or Vista and Carlsbad,
Okay.
like Vista's got some of what Carlsbad has, but Carlsbad doesn't really have the hood like Vista
Yeah.
does. Um, and like Belgium is very working class for the most part, like northern Belgium, whereas the southern portion's a little more French influenced.
Right.
Um, and then Holland, Holland's, like, a lot of farm country. It's got some awesome, like, seaside towns that we've played at. And then there's, like, the more, traditional, like, old villages and towns, that maybe aren't farming, but, a little more social, town squares and restaurants and that kind of thing. Um, but as far as the difference between there and America, it's pretty different. Yeah, there's a different appreciation for what we do over there.
Yeah. I, I've
Um,
I've always found that when you travel to another country, the country you learn most about is your country.
yeah, yeah, I would say that. Um, I definitely came home. Like I've done, there was a portion there where over the course of like a year to like 15 months, I probably was, I probably had spent half of that time between Iceland and France. So I was, besides the touring that I would do here, I was away from home for the better part of like 6 months or so, 7 months, in a different country, and in that time in different countries. Yeah, I definitely came home each time with a different perspective on home, for sure.
Did you write any songs while you were over there?
I don't know if I sat down to write them, but I would assume, I don't write. Lately, I've been writing every day.
Nice.
I write every day, at least mentally, but I don't sit down
Right.
and it doesn't come out musically every day. So I don't know that I sat down and wrote while I was there, because most of the time we're so busy. Like
Right.
if I went over there for, if I went over there for like, maybe we would go over for 2 to 3 months at a time sometimes.
Right.
So if I was over there for like 70 days, I might play 90 shows.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of two-a-days, not a lot of time. Like you're basically sleeping, eating, or traveling to a gig.
Right.
So I don't know that I really sat down and wrote anything, but I would guess a lot of the songs, you know, in between those tours was influenced by being there. And there's songs that I've written in the last couple months that are directly inspired by, you know, being over there.
Yeah, you got a new album coming out, right?
Yeah, I've got a series of them coming out in the next few months. I'm trying to line it up so they can kind of come out one right behind the other. Um, and they're going to be a little different than what I've done for a long time. So, yeah, I'm lining those up right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
You are doing that out of your studio in Big Sur up there?
Yeah, I set up like a mobile studio in Big Sur, um, like overlooking the ocean. I think I sent you a photo.
Yeah, you did. You did a
Yeah,
good job.
so like two sliding glass doors, just glass facing, overlooking the water, just basically right over the water on a cliff.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
gonna picture later of like your guitar. The picture you sent me was just it said everything. It was like your guitar and the sliding doors and then the view, and I'm like, look at this guy, man, he's doing it.
yeah. So yeah, recording right now. I've actually recorded one of the records, and I'm gonna do it again before. I'm not gonna release it, that one,
Right?
just because I'm not totally. It's good, but it's not the one that I hear in my head.
Okay.
So I want to record. I want to make sure I record that one before I put it out. But the process for the way that I'm recording this is pretty quick. Like the next series of releases is just going to be live acoustic guitar and voice. Like it's not full band productions like everything else has been.
Kind of
So
like plugged, kind of like an unplugged thing that you would see people sit down
yeah,
and get into.
yeah, yeah. So that when you're doing it that way, the process is much quicker. I mean,
Right.
I can record the songs in as long as it takes to play the songs. I don't have to worry about overdubs or other musicians where it can take weeks or months. Um, it's just a matter of capturing it on the right day at the right time, and so I'm just working on that.
You know, it totally reminds me of like this might not be the right analogy, but with the way you describe the music is, if you have all these dubs and that stuff, that seems like process to me. And when I think of process, I think of processed food.
Yep.
You're doing it just like straight. You're in Big Sur. You're being influenced by being healthy and eating the raw food, and now you're putting out the raw music. It's just like the unplugged acoustic version.
Yeah. I mean, I eat clean. I don't, no animals, no, very little processed or fake anything. Um, very little cooked food. Yeah. Um, I don't drink. I don't
Right.
do any. I never really have. And yeah, I think it's translating to the product I want to put out. And the analogy I make a lot of times for people is like, organic, real food versus like McDonald's.
Yep.
That to me, that's what the radio is, you
Yeah.
know? And so I want to give, people, and I mean, I've always done it that way, but even like the last record that I did in Nashville, the Cinderella sessions, that's all live, that's four guys in a room playing together, and there's no trickery, there's no overdubs, there's no nothing. Other than the harmony vocal that somebody came in and did later, but he did it later that day. Like the music, my singing and guitar, like I played, especially in Nashville, it's a huge no-no. But I played rhythm, sang, and played my guitar solos while the band was playing. You know, like a lot of so-called live in studio recordings, even especially in Nashville, like the solos and stuff were overdubbed. You know, so we did it. It's all there, just how we did it. With Lloyd Green on pedal steel, who if you're in the country music world, Lloyd Green is on, like the Mount Rushmore of pedal steel guitar players.
Nice.
So yeah, and the studio we did it in was pretty legendary. But yeah, I'm taking the same process and just transferring it to me by myself with one guitar and two microphones.
That's almost like the opposite of Beck, who had two turntables and a microphone.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, and I hope people dig it. Like, my music has never been polished or really, you know, processed all that much at all. So, um,
I think
you know,
that's what gives it a unique quality. And the more that I talk to you, and I think the more that, and I think when people listen to this, like that does translate. When you talked about your family, kind of being the very foundation for you, being in music for a long time, and that's also probably why you were able to, when you got to Nashville, to kind of, look like you fit in there, is because you've been around the right inspirations. But I don't know that much about Nashville, and I know some people watching do. But when you said there's some no-nos in Nashville, like those like the unwritten rules of the game, or can you tell us a little bit about Nashville and what it must have been like to get there for the first time?
yeah, I mean, they're known for the slick production and the very polished sounding, like perfect sounding records. Um, but if you're not in that world and you're just a music lover and listener, uh, you know, that sound is not something that you just walk in and do. A lot of those records they could take a year or more to make,
Right?
and it's very, like, I don't know, not just processed, but it's very micromanaged.
Mm.
I mean, a singer could go in and sing like a couple syllables at a time, and they can patch it together.
Wow.
And the guitar player can go in and record solos the same way, or record 20, 50 to 50 guitar solos, and they can take the best, like, notes from each guitar solo and stitch them together. And it's easy to do that. The drums can be micromanaged to the point where the timing is so perfect that it can never be replicated like that live.
Mm.
you know and that's cool. It's I don't, it's not good or bad, it just is what it is, and it's just not my thing. um and for me, I want to be able to record the same way that I perform live, and it's never perfect. you know
Right.
and I don't like recording over and over and over again. I just want to capture the essence of what I'm doing, and it just has to be good enough and have the feel, for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I admire that. I mean, if I go to concerts, whether it's a favorite band or a comedian, I kind of like the fact that it's going to be a little different show than anybody else has seen. You know what I mean? I might catch Adam Lopez on a night where he's like, "Try something new over here." I might be the only guy to see that, or
Yeah.
I might get to see people working out material, and I didn't know that about Nashville. I didn't know that it was like garage band, and maybe that's not an accurate assessment of what that is. I don't want to downplay that, but it's fascinating to me because I've heard when I was young, you just hear about the legendary stars coming out of Nashville, and people, if you want to make it, you got to go to Nashville and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've always kind of been curious about that.
Yeah,
And
and I don't want to give the impression that it's all like that, because it's definitely
right,
not.
right,
Some of the best musicians in the world are there, so they actually, a lot of records come out of there, and they just sound perfect or near perfect because those guys are that good.
yeah,
But like when you think of Nashville on more of a generic level, like you think of what you hear on the radio and some of the so-called like country stars,
yeah,
that you see on the billboards and that kind of thing. And there's so much money behind those records that they have to micromanage it. They can't afford to risk it, you know. So it's a different world. I'm lucky that my world in Nashville is a lot more rootsy and organic. There's been a movement there in the last 10 years of some younger guys coming up and doing things in a more old school way. And a lot of the musicians that worked in the studios on records from the golden era of like the 50s and 60s still live there and still work in the studios. Um, so I'm lucky that I got in with those guys.
yeah,
I'm not in with the Shania Twains or Brad Paisley people of Nashville. I don't have any connections to almost any of them or any of those musicians, but a lot of the old school cats, a lot of the guys I work with have, are in their 70s and 80s now. But that's where I want to be. That's just my
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's a commonality in the commercialness of things where, you know, when you like I know a lot of people that surf and when they get sponsored, they're like, yeah, we got it. And I liken it in my mind, it might be to a record deal, and let me know if you think it's accurate. Once they get sponsored, they're all stoked, but then they realize that that sponsor owns them. I'd imagine if
Yeah.
you put out a record and then they own all your stuff, and you at first you're stoked, and you're like, wait a minute, they own all my stuff, right? Isn't that kind of nuts?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's totally like that. The big difference is with like the bigger labels. Traditionally, what happens is you get a lot of money up front to make that record, and you think it's your money, and you get to you pocket some, you live off of it, so you
Right,
can, and you spend it on the studio and the musicians, because you can't necessarily work 40 hours a week and make that record.
right, right.
But you don't get any of the money from the sales of that record
Mm,
until all the money that they gave you gets paid first.
I see.
So
Interesting.
so you don't have that 40-hour a week job once the record's done, and you also don't have any way to generate income off those record sales until you make all that money back. You know.
It's pretty
And,
kind of sinister if you think about it.
oh yeah, I think it totally is.
Okay, good.
Um,
Me too.
so uh, I went without a lot of those opportunities, partially by choice and partially just because they weren't offered to me. There were some that were offered to me, but um, I've done it on my terms, for better or for worse, and it's cool. I
Yeah,
dig it. Like I've been able to do, like we talk about coming from Vista.
yeah,
Vista's super diverse,
it is.
and
It
if
is.
you know it as the beautiful lush hillside community with nice houses and a pretty good medium income, um, and you assume that that's where I came from, then you probably would assume that like I could afford to do this because there's money somewhere else in the in mom's bank account, or
Yeah,
grandpa's bank account, that if I failed and had to go back home, it wasn't that big of a deal. And the reality is like I came from the other side,
yeah,
where my parents were teenagers when they had me.
right.
At least my mom was, and my dad was barely not a teenager. Um, and he didn't work. My father didn't work very long before he. I don't know if you remember this. It happened when we were like 7 years old, and we were on the same baseball team. My dad was like in a major accident and broke his neck, and that was it. Like no more work, no more anything. So
Mm,
basically a single mom working,
yeah,
a job or two. And so we were dirt poor for the most part. Like I shared a bedroom with my parents up until that point,
yeah,
and I didn't live in an actual house until I was 17. So it took a good decade for us to get to the point where we could move into our own house. Um, So instead of, like, I guess what I saw around me told me that the risk involved in trying to make a living at music wasn't that big of a risk.
Right.
Like the people all around my circle, like my parents' friends and whatnot, like most of them were alcoholics, probably, used drugs or sold drugs,
Right. Right.
um, and worked, like construction jobs or like manual labor.
Yep.
And that's, that's fine. And, that's whatever. It's not, like I said, it's not good or bad. It's just not my thing.
Right.
But,
Right.
but what I saw was people working really hard and not getting anywhere different, their whole life. And I've revisited some of them. Their whole life was and still is, they're in their 60s now. There was in like a 10 to 20 mile radius of home, and that
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah.
And that was it, and still is for a lot of people. So I figured, like, well, I do know what hard work is, and I know what, integrity is. So why
Yeah.
why don't I just take that and apply it to something I like? And if I'm, what's the point of working a job I don't like and living at the poverty level when I can just apply it to something I do like and live at the poverty level and still get by, you know,
Right.
still keep a roof over my head and food in my stomach. So
Yep.
that's that was my silly theory, and it turns out that, it worked, and it worked even a little better than than eating crumbs.
Yeah.
Um, and it's still getting better. It's getting easier every year, other than the current situation right now, which
Yeah.
is kind of a mind blower. But
That is. How is that affecting the music industry, and not only the music industry, but how is that affect your your life? It sounds like you're still to record albums, but I bet you can't go and play anywhere.
yeah, I mean, I can go play in the street corners, which is
Mm.
kind of cool, because that's when I
That,
was younger. I did a lot of that as a teenager.
right. Right.
Um, but it kind of happened in a weird way. It happened at the best time for me, because I was already transitioning out of, because most of what I do would be considered like Texas music. It
Right.
kind of runs the gamut of country and roots music and blues. So, you know, a lot of my home base musically was out of Austin. Like I worked in Nashville quite a bit, but it
Mhm.
wasn't a home base. I still have a place where I like I still have a room at a friend's house, where Austin musically is like my home base. So when I was living in Denver for a while, and I was traveling back, I was spending like half my time in Austin and half my time in Denver. Basically, to answer your question, like in all of that, I was transitioning out of solely relying on playing like dance halls and bars from like 10 to 2 in the morning, 4 or 5 nights a week or whatever,
Right.
um, to doing more production behind the scenes work, like getting music for like TV and movies, um, online content, providing music for that, uh, songwriting with, I can release my own music that I write on my own, but also get it out in the world where other people maybe with, maybe some of those bigger acts in Nashville might record it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the way the current situation kind of hit, I was already in that transition, so I wasn't really playing out live, and I hadn't been for about a month when I first heard about the COVID thing.
Right.
And then when it really hit and affected me, like in March, I guess it really kind of took hold. I hadn't been playing. I'd only played out like twice in like 3 months, where before I was playing out like 5 nights a week, and I had been for years. I was working, at home to basically change my business mold,
Right.
so that I could play out when I wanted to, and when it was fun, but generate income, like I said, with production and songwriting. This all hit, and that kind of put everything on hold, including the production stuff. It's allowed me to keep working on songwriting and recording those songs, but I had to shut down my studio and all that stuff. because I just didn't have the space to keep it up, and I didn't have the income from the gigs to afford to keep it.
Yeah.
So what I did is I went out and got like a side job for fun and for like, money in the pocket. And it's the first like real job I've had in like over a decade. So it worked out in that I'm glad I did it
Right.
because when the COVID thing really took hold, I found a better job that also provided housing
Oh,
in
nice.
Big Sur, right? So like,
That's hard to beat.
yeah, so I'm getting paid to live in this cool house, plus I'm getting a paycheck in a place that's able to operate during all this.
Right.
So even though I'm not playing music, I wouldn't have been able to do it anyway had I, not prepared. I didn't prepare for COVID, but I did prepare for it, not unknowingly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's been a huge blessing. Like it's been awesome. It allows me all the time I need to write and record, and still make some money, and still have a cool house and in an amazing spot with a roof over my head. So it's kept me from performing live, but I wasn't really doing that anyway at the time. I was trying to be sneaky about it, and I didn't announce to anybody really like that I was retiring, because I was retiring in a sense from
Right.
a part of it, but not totally. Um, because the bigger picture, like I said, besides the production, was to take the songwriting stuff and go out and perform it, but not have to, with songwriting, you can perform it in coffee houses and listening rooms and theaters,
Right.
and you're done by 9 or 10 in the evening, not just beginning your night, because
Right.
I was working really hard to get out of that environment that, other than playing music in it, I'm not comfortable in it. I don't, like I said, I don't drink. I don't care to stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning, or I like to get up early and rise with the sun as close as I can,
Yeah.
uh, and exercise and run. And I aside from music, I try to lead a healthy lifestyle. And playing most nights of the week and staying up till 2 or 3 because you have to. It's really hard to wake up early, and it's really hard to make time to meditate and do yoga, or all the things that I prefer to do with my time. It just got to the point where I had experienced enough of that music in the music world, of that element, and I feel like I've kind of carved out a place for me where my reputation and my pedigree or my resume, I felt like I got to a point where I could make that change, and I'm pretty sure people are going to still support me in making music, but I can make it more in a way that suits me and my lifestyle, and not just suits the music. Suits both.
Yeah. It sounds like it's the natural progression of a maturing artist to move from, that phase of being out on tour and been on the front lines, and then moving to a position where, like you said, it's if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, you gotta follow the earth's plan. Get up when the sun does and go to bed when the sun does.
Yeah, and so being able to do it as a solo artist, I'm not responsible for a band. I don't have people that I have to feed and transport
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and lodge on the road. And um, you know when you have that's overhead. It's a business,
A
so
lot.
it's
Yeah.
overhead. And so when you do have those things, and I was lucky. Like, those guys are to this day, like the guys I work with are some of my best friends. Like, we keep in touch even though we're not working together.
Right.
So I'm not complaining, but with that overhead is the need to work as often as possible, so that if that's 4, 5, 6, 7 nights a week,
Right.
you never say no to work.
Right.
Um, and it's great and it's fun, and I did it for a long time, so I got to experience a lot of awesome things that I never would have otherwise. I'm glad I did it, but if I look at the long term, you know, I only needed to do it so much before I've been there, done that. So as a songwriter and a solo artist, I can tour kind of on my own schedule. So if
Yeah.
I want to play 1 or 2 nights a week, and spend those other 5 days actually seeing the sights and running those trails and hiking those trails and stopping to experience that, this town or that town or this restaurant or whatever, I can do it, I,
Yeah.
and like I said before, like I'm really lucky in that I feel like I have a good standing in the music world with the supporters and the music fans and stuff, that in the venues, that I can continue to work, and even though the product is similar, it's different.
Yep.
I think, people are still there to support it. It allows me to live, because my lifestyle has always kind of been adventurous, and, going out and experience like surfing, and then going out to the mountains the next day and mountain biking.
Yep.
And then, on the other days I'm skateboarding, like,
Yeah.
so, when you're in a van full of guys that you're working with, there's not a whole lot of time for that. You're always on the go. You're always just trying to catch up on sleep. You're always trying to, catch up on nutrition,
Yep.
and then it's time to set up and work. So yeah, I've just, the COVID thing, it I think it's in a weird way going to play out and it has so far. It's played out in my favor. You know,
You might want to dedicate the album to COVID. It's done a lot for you, man. This goes out to COVID right here.
and there's some songs that, you know, there's some songs on that will be on the first one, and they'll probably be, I've got it. I've already got. I want to do them in 9 song increments because I like the number 9.
Nice. Okay.
I think it's like time wise. I think it's a good, because that's for me, that's roughly 20 to 25 minutes worth of music.
Okay.
So like for the modern attention span, I think it works out well. It's not
Oh,
too much.
yeah.
It still fits on a vinyl record, right?
Nice.
Like old school vinyl records, which we did on the last record. But an old school vinyl record, like if you look at those, they've only got like 4 songs on each side, right? Because you can't put as much music on a record as you can on a CD.
Right. Right.
So it works out in that regard. It's kind of a throwback to how records were released time wise. But with that in mind, like I've got, I don't know, if I do them in 9 song increments, I'm probably sitting on 5 albums worth of material right now, plus the songs I'll probably write, between this and the next time we message each other on Facebook every
Yeah.
week or two.
Yeah.
All right. So by this time next week, there'll probably be another 3 or so songs, like for the 6th album that'll be done by then. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering any of your questions or just
All of them.
rambling. Okay.
No, solid.
So yeah, that's kind of the COVID thing for me right now is it's allowed me to make that transition, and it allowed me to do it under the radar,
Nice.
right? Because
Yeah.
one of the things that I was really struggling with, do I tell people I've retired and am changing my business mold,
Hmm.
or do I do it under the radar and just and not make a big deal of it, just make this the next new thing without announcing it? And I was worried about it because for a couple months when I wasn't playing gigs, and I didn't tell anybody that I wasn't playing gigs, except for a few people that asked, all my friends that are musicians were still out there working, and I wasn't out there with them,
Yeah.
right? And I was starting to wonder, like, if people start noticing that I'm not out there with them, that's like in the business sense, regardless of what business you're in, that's not necessarily a good thing, right? You don't want to be out of the loop too long.
Right.
And then boom, this thing all happened and nobody's playing, and nobody really noticed that I wasn't, because we've been in the COVID situation longer than the time that I was taking that little hiatus.
Right.
Started that to the time COVID really hit was only a couple months, whereas now COVID's been here for over 4 months now. I first heard about it in December,
Yeah.
and I started seeing people affected by it as far as employment and that kind of thing, like in February. So it's been almost half a year.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, like it kind of leveled the playing field of all my friends that are out there full-time musicians. It leveled the playing field of them not being able to play, me not being able to play, and then the couple of month break that I took where I just chose not to.
You know, there's an interesting pattern there that I see, and I think it happens to all of us, but from what you've just said, it has become really clear to me. And I think that pattern for creativity is that when you leave a group of people you normally hang out with, it tends to be a transformation for you. And if you look at what happened to you, if you kind of went out and then all of a sudden you've changed up your business mold, you've changed up this style from this style, from late night style to this acoustic or a bit more organic form. If people are honest with themselves, I think they would find when you leave the security of the group, you're forced to grow. When you leave the security of everything you know, you're forced to rely on yourself. And that's when the real creative process happens. That's when you can truly translate vision into reality. When you find the courage to go it alone, you find out what you're truly capable of.
I think I didn't realize it until you said it, but I totally agree. Like looking back, um, one of the reasons besides like the lifestyle part of it that I wanted to change things up is when I was playing that much, and I I'm not like I play theaters and sometimes pretty big festivals, but most of my work was like small theaters opening for bigger names or hustling bars like dance halls like down in Texas or in Colorado or Oklahoma, places where people go to dance and drink. And those gigs are 4 or 5 hour gigs every night with almost no breaks ever. Like we rarely took breaks.
Right.
Because we were successful, we would a lot of times not take breaks because people would come to dance, when we played.
Right.
And so the energy expense to do that and catch and try to get enough sleep during the day and all that thing, I didn't. I lost the ability to practice. Practice
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of the time to sit down and write songs because you're kind of at the mercy of inspiration, so you can't just do it whenever you want necessarily. And I lost, and I shouldn't say I lost. I knowingly gave those. I paid that price knowingly
Well
to
put.
do what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I just got to a point where I didn't want to do it anymore. I gave up a lot of the time that I spend like now reading and meditating and learning about myself and life and all that kind of thing so that I can write better songs or that I can further educate myself about how music works because I'm always learning,
Sure.
whether it's music production or just the craft of music, the language of music. Since November, I've really been diving deep into practicing and learning and education. All my education, for the most part, is self-education. You
Mm.
know, I did take guitar lessons, but I didn't take that many for that long, and I wasn't a great student. In school, I was in the gifted programs for quite a while, but then I got phased out because I just was detached. I wasn't into it. I
Right.
was just because I was good at it didn't mean I was good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't care for it. It didn't speak to me. Like I went to college for a few months to Palomar,
Right. Right.
um, but I did it because my mom asked me to do it. Just give it a try.
Yeah.
And so by the time I graduated, like my grades weren't great from high school, but not because I couldn't. I just didn't want to.
Right.
And so I honored my mom's request to at least try college before you just go off and do what you want to do. Do this
Right.
for me. Do this for me, and then you can go do what you want to do.
Right.
So I took the entrance exams, like after being like a C minus C plus
Right.
student at best, and I got I think there's like a 30 there's a 3-part entrance exam or placement test that they put you through, and it's like 30 questions like in 3 different departments, and I only missed one question from each department. So like I got a 97% on
Right.
my entrance placement thing. And so they put me in these really ridiculously difficult classes. But the one thing that they did put me in was like this really high level literature, creative writing class.
Mm.
And so that was cool because I loved it. In math and science, I could do, but I just didn't care enough about it to apply myself. And I'm not smart enough to be able to miss a whole chunk and then catch up.
Yeah, that's really difficult.
Yeah, I think that's difficult for anybody.
Yeah, it brings up an interesting point that it's so amazing how like different literature can influence us, and a great story is something that everybody can get behind. There's a lot of mythology and history that speaks to the heart of just a good story. And if you, I've been reading like a lot of Joseph Campbell lately, and it talks about like the hero's journey, which is he denies
Mm-hmm.
call to adventure, and then he meets a mentor. They go on the call to adventure. They almost lose, but then they conquer it. It's like the story of everyone's life. And it seems to me that you may have implemented the hero's journey when you were driving your big rig Route 103.
That's a Dale Watson song.
Sorry,
Exit 109.
exit 109. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my buddy Dale Watson wrote that. It's hilarious. If anybody's not aware of Dale Watson, he's one of my favorite songwriters around. Like, so clever and like poignant, but like simple, like and funny. What a sense of humor.
Yeah, and those, I think that might come along with, we were talking about processed music and processed food. So many people, you know, it seems to me a lot of really great songs tell a story. And
Mm-hmm.
when it just becomes a hook and a few lines of dialogue, I think you get away from the real soul of music. I like the storytelling, and I think that is something that you've been doing, and I think that we could use more of that in the world of music.
Yeah. See, like when I think of what I do when people ask me, it's hard to explain, but like folk music is what I do, but that's become a sound. It's become a
Mm,
thing. Like it's become like Bob Dylan and his acoustic guitar and his harmonica. But folk music is not that. It's a type of art,
right?
and it's the type of art of the working man. The common man. It's not classical music. It's not educated music, but it's relatable music to the 99%. That's country music is folk music. Blues music is folk music. Rap is folk music,
Yeah,
right? So um, I've always tried to work under that umbrella so that I could play whatever different sounds I want, but it's that blue collar folk approach. Um, and real quick, speaking of Dale Watson, he's got two songs, at least two that come to mind that you should check out.
will.
Talk, one of them is called "Country My Ass," and talking about the Nashville thing, and
Okay.
and one is called "Nashville Rash."
Okay.
You should check those out. They're hilarious.
Yeah, I can't.
Um,
I will.
yeah, but yeah, like getting back to kind of come full circle to what you were talking about. I left college after a few weeks,
Hmm.
and the reason I left is because a few, I think it was like 3 weeks or 6 weeks in, I got my first like real gig. I'd played like backyard parties and stuff before that, and made money doing it. Like I was making, I think I first got paid to play music when I was like 12 or so. Like people like in junior high, like at Lincoln, would have backyard parties,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And some of us hung with older people that were in high school, so we were going to backyard parties. We were living like we were in high school when we were in like sixth, seventh grade,
right.
because Vista was that kind of town. You could do that.
Yeah,
It wasn't like now where backyard parties are just like super difficult to pull off without getting shut down. So like I was hanging out with older dudes and hanging out at parties and stuff, but we'd get hired to play music at parties when we were in like sixth, seventh, eighth grade. So like I was already making money doing it, but
right.
I got my first like real gig where I was me playing songs I wrote in San Diego. Like I had been learning my craft early on. Somebody told me, if it's great that you, because I just wanted to be a guitar player. I wanted to play guitar for people and just sit in the back and do that. And that's what I was doing. But somebody told me when I was real young, like, if you want to have a career and you want to have some job security, don't just be a guitar player. Learn how to sing,
Mhm.
learn how to write a song so that you learn how a song is constructed, so that you have, it helps your guitar playing. It helps you back somebody up if you know how songs work. If you can create your own songs and you can sing, you can also be your own business, your own
Yeah.
entity. So I got a job when I was like 18 or 19 in Pacific Beach at a place called the Interchange.
Nice.
And they gave me, I think it was Thursday night. Every Thursday was mine. And the reason it opened up is because Jewel had been there and that was her gig.
Whoa.
And she got signed and she had to leave. And I took her spot.
Wow. I
And so,
didn't.
yeah, that was like my first, like, first professional gig as myself, playing songs I wrote and learning that craft. I'm trying to get back to answering your question, like where it all kind of originated from, and talking about education and all that stuff. That's how I got my foot in the door. You know, a fellow singer songwriter who was pretty successful in Southern California liked what I did and supported me, and she said, "You got to meet the owner of this coffee house because a spot is going to open up. A residency is opening up."
Right.
And I didn't know it was Jewel. I just
Yeah.
thought it was a gig, but I knew that the place had a reputation as one of the spots where the pros in San Diego played. Because
Yeah.
at the time, there was a coffee house on every corner, and they all had open mics, and they all had live music on the weekends. And almost anybody could get a gig doing that, including me. I was getting gigs doing that, occasionally. But this was like a house gig. This was, you're on the roster.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it started. That saying at the time, being able to tell other venues in other cities that that's what I was doing with my Thursdays. They were like, "Well, okay, we don't even need to hear you. Just come in on whatever date, and we'll give you a gig."
Yeah.
And so it's just been a process of that approach, and doing my best not to burn any bridges, and doing my best to offer a quality product that I've been able to just kind of keep building it up.
Yeah. It seemed like, see, that part I find really interesting, and it's something you would only know if you were in the business. There's so much rich history at clubs that you wouldn't even think are clubs. Or there's so much rich history if you learn about it. Like how many people have played the Whiskey a Go Go, or how many people have played, you know, different rooms in San Diego, and it's just like I had no idea that Jewel played there or was like a resident there, and it just
Mm-hmm.
that's the stuff you would only know if you were in a position like yourself. And
Yeah, and that was where it all started. Like the we were talking about being self-educated for the
right,
purpose of furthering, your life's goals. So if you're not going to do it via school or traditional routes, you still have to do it.
right,
You still have to put the work in, and not just the hands-on work of your craft, but you have to know the history of the people that that did it before you, so you know how to connect the dots and how it got to where you are.
yeah. It's interesting. Like, um, there's this book called Technopoly, but in the book, the guy makes the argument, much like you did, that history should be part of every subject. Whether you're going to talk about baseball, guitar playing, or surfing, every sport, every activity has a history behind it. And if you want to succeed in that passion you're doing, you should know the history of the thing you're learning, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
learning from people before you.
yeah. Like I haven't been. This is my first time like back in California in almost 20 years. Like, with some roots here. So, but when we were kids, we were surfing and skateboarding.
Yeah, yeah,
I still know my surf history and my skateboarding history,
yeah, yeah, totally.
right? And I never really pursued doing any of those professionally,
Right.
but I love them so much, and I still do, that I couldn't sit here and tell you that I love them, but then not be able to answer your questions about them.
Yeah, yeah, it's fair.
I feel weird about that,
Yeah,
So there's things along the way that whether I try to do them professionally or not, if I truly love them or care about them, I need to learn about them,
Right.
and more than just the doing of them.
Yeah.
You know, I still know my baseball history pretty well. You know, when we were kids, we would nerd out on that stuff.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, baseball cards and reading or watching This Week in Baseball and learning our history.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
yeah.
I'm so amazed at, like, if you look at where, like, North County, San Diego, Adam, there is so many talented people that came out of there. Like, if you look at the skateboarding industry, the
Oh
surfing,
yeah.
at the music industry, like, just look at the people we went to school with, and like, dude, there's some real killers out there. You know what I mean? That just went on to be artists in their own right. You know, it's so mind blowing to look back and be like, dude, I can't believe I used to hang out with that. Dude, this guy's
Yeah.
or this guy's a pro skater, dude, this guy's a pro surfer, or
Yeah.
this girl's a oh my god, have you seen that girl's paintings? You know, it's like, it's so, to me, I feel so inspired and thankful to have got to play a small role in all these people's lives that are so, at least to me, important and artistic. And looking back on your life, I hope everyone can look back on their life, and if they don't see it now, I think they will when they're later. But I hope they can all find some inspiration from the people they hung out with. Do you think was there something in the water in San Diego, or what was it?
I feel like it was just the right combination of time and place
Mm,
and souls. Like the right people were there.
yeah,
You know, because it couldn't. I don't. Maybe it could have. I don't know. But I feel like it was meant to be that group of people. Like we were really lucky in that there were cliques and there were groups and all that thing, but there was like this inner circle that was bigger than all those little cliques,
right.
where we all had one foot in one circle and one foot in the other circle, but we were all in this bigger circle where we all had similar interests and then we all had really different interests, but we were all friends.
Yeah,
You know, and that's it wasn't a bunch of closed off small circles of people that didn't interact. We all got along. We all, you know, even like we had a huge gang problem that people don't realize, and we had a
yeah,
huge drug problem that people don't realize.
yeah.
Like, I think it might still stand. Like we had the biggest drug bust in American high school history happen.
At Rancho, yeah,
Yeah, while we were there, and we had the biggest national gang crisis in junior high.
yeah,
Like we had more gang members per capita registered with like the sheriff's department than anywhere in the country at the same time that we had the drug thing.
yeah,
But we were friends with some of those kids in those gangs and some of those kids selling drugs. They weren't
yeah,
all bad people. They were just doing stupid shit.
yeah. They were. It's true. It's true.
Yeah. There was a lot of good people that came out of that.
Yeah, it's so weird to think about. You have an explode. You have the worst drug crisis, but then also an explosion of creativity. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Some of the, like, there is. I think a lot of people. Maybe it was our circle of friends, but you know, a lot of people were so talented in a lot of ways. I remember. Do you remember Josh and Dylan Moore? They were
Oh yeah. Yeah.
like, dude, those guys. They went to school with us since we were kids, and like, I remember those guys doing like the stairs at Rancho, the library stairs for
Oh
people that
yeah.
it's like 25 stairs, and like, both of those guys were some of the most articulate men I've ever known. Those guys were like on another level when it came to intelligence,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
on a different level when it came to skateboarding. Like, I just remember being like, always looking at those guys going, dude, they got it. These guys did it, man. How do they do those stairs?
Yeah.
How does Dylan so good at math? You know?
They were they were I used to go over to their house when I was, because they were a couple years younger than or older than me.
Right?
And I remember going over to their house like on the weekends, like way too early, like 7 in the morning. And like I lived miles away, and I would hike my way down the railroad tracks with my skateboard and go knock on their door and like, let's go. Like I would be raging, and they would just be like half asleep and like
Yeah.
trying to like I was like a little kid to them. Like
Yeah.
they couldn't believe that I would just be so amped to go hang
Yeah.
out with them and skate. But they were always cool. They never slammed the door in my face. They never were like, dude, what do you get out of here? They never did that.
Yeah.
And their older brothers were musicians.
Oh, I
You
didn't
know,
know that.
yeah, it's like Star and Ben. And Ben's a really well-respected music producer and musician in San Diego still.
Oh, I could see
Like
that.
he's a huge part of the music scene. He's a hub.
Mm.
Yeah, like he's produced some pretty big albums, and like some of them for like friends of mine, like bands that I've been in or played in
Yeah.
as a hired gun. Like he's done their records and stuff. He's well respected.
Yeah. I
And and you were talking about like keeping it real and not, you know, like not selling out musically or artistically. That's what Ben and Dylan did with skateboarding.
Yeah, it is.
They were at least in skateboarding 5 years is
Right.
huge.
Right.
The progression happens so fast in skateboarding. You know, every 3 months they were years ahead of most people,
Yeah.
and chose not to make it their profession because they, I guess intuitively, they knew the risk involved in making your love your job.
Yeah.
And that's like, at the time I thought, you guys are nuts. Like, you know, I was young and like eager, and they were wise old men when they were like 16.
Yeah.
They were super
They,
smart.
they really were.
um and so like now I look back and just like just mad respect. You know, they I mean, it helped that they were super smart. They wasn't, skateboarding wasn't their only way out.
Right.
Where some of our other friends, it kind of was. They had a head start compared to like myself and some of our friends
Right.
that were able to make their art or their love their job. You know, for me, like I unless I wanted to do something like dig ditches or, you know, put roofs on houses, I really didn't have a whole lot of other options.
Right.
Like I said, it was a risk, but as far as was concerned, it wasn't a big risk. Whereas to them, they didn't. I don't think I could be wrong, but like they were just smart enough and secure in their life and in their personalities enough to know that skateboarding wasn't their only option.
Yeah. Maybe that's
And
good at it too, is because they just.
yeah, it was all love. It was all
Yeah.
passion. There
Yeah.
was never any. There was never any hurry or rush to make it their living.
Right.
It was, and that's why I think that's why it was so. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but that's why it came so easy to them.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I remember those. Like, we'd have skateboard sessions like out in front of when Alex
Uh,
Cespedes lived
yeah.
behind you, and
Yeah.
I was at his house all the time, and we
Yeah.
would all meet up in front of your house with Josh and Dylan,
Yeah.
and go down to the shopping center and skate. But it was just so effortless, man. It was so beautiful
It was art.
watching.
You guys are
Yeah,
art.
it was watching those guys do what they did is a beautiful thing, whether you're into skateboarding or not, because you don't get to see people do things on that level very often.
And it's so amazing to see people do something so effortlessly when, like, when you and I would watch them, you would agree that it was beautiful and effortlessly, and we were in awe, right?
Yeah, because we knew how difficult what they were doing was, but it looked so easy.
That's how I feel when I watch you play guitar.
Thank you.
I think most people would. I it's just weird how it works like that. You know, we can describe, we can see. I had this theory too. Like, you know, when you think about people, if you see something in somebody that bothers you, that's because that quality that bothers you in somebody is something you have in
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
Or vice versa. If you see something beautiful or poetic that's beautiful in someone else, it's a quality you have in yourself. You're seeing yourself in the other people.
yeah, and yeah. I guess we're getting into more of the like the deeper end,
Yeah.
and that's good. That's good because getting back again to the questions you were asking me before
Right.
about how I got to where I'm at. Like I feel like I'm just getting started because I'm getting to the realization of what you're talking about when it comes to the spiritual side of it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I didn't come from the best home. I didn't have, you know, and I hate to, I'm not putting anybody on blast, but like I didn't have the best parenting. You know, I was in a lot of ways I was on my own by the time I was 7 or 8 years old. You know, I was coming home to an empty house and cooking my own food. And, you know, I was just independent because I had to be. Like, that's just how it worked out. And we didn't have a lot of means. So I couldn't, you know, I couldn't get to go to do things that a lot of the other kids got to go and do. I was stuck at home and just kind of making my own way. So when I was, you know, in my late teens and I started to realize like I could make my own way without needing, you know, anybody's financial backing. You know, I've been really lucky. Like my parents haven't really had to support me. They've
Right.
helped me out. They've helped me out here and there, but like I know of people with real so-called real jobs that have needed way more help than I have. Like
Sure.
I'm pretty lucky that way. But my point is not that I did it. My point is that I got turned on very early to the educational part of the spiritual part,
Mm.
and knowing that um, there were a lot of scars in like I guess these days we call it PTSD
Right.
of the childhood that were showing signs, and it was already happening in high school where the signs were becoming apparent even to me as a teenager that if I didn't get help or start helping myself, that end of things was going to prohibit the it was gonna cancel out the talent end of things.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Exactly what you
I
mean.
I could have all the talent in the world, but if the mental, emotional, spiritual part of stuff didn't get some work and some help, it was going to sink the ship. Because
You know,
you can't be successful at anything if you're unhealthy, you know, emotionally or spiritually.
yeah.
And
I,
I started to realize that I was, you know.
in some ways, it seems to me that some of the people we think are the least fortunate actually have the most opportunity. Let me try to unpack that. Like when you're 7
Wow.
coming home by yourself and your father had an accident. In a weird way, life taught you at an early age that you're gonna need to make it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, you were mentally capable of understanding the lesson life was trying to teach. You know what I mean by that? Like some people feel like they're abandoned. You may have felt like that, but ultimately, if you didn't grow up like that, you might be where you are. You might not that, hey, I gotta quit. I gotta get here. Hey, it's okay to be away from you. But I've been doing it on my own since I was 7. Well, some people that have a good, some people that they're never on. They don't get to go and be on their own until they're 30 or 40.
Right.
And by that time, you are 13 years ahead of them with independent, understanding the law of the jungle.
Yeah. Um, and you know, you say like mentally, I understood that, and I don't know that I did mentally. It's almost like that same part of me that writes songs where you're just compelled to do it.
Mm,
It's not even a mental thing that you think about. You just know that this is something you need to address, or something you need to do, or something you need to put work into. Um, and this is where I hope your father's listening, because because he was a big part of that.
yeah.
Because because his presence at the time that it was in my life was really a crucial crossroads. And in fact, I don't know if you probably don't know this, and man, if I get emotional, I apologize, but uh, he actually sat my mom down and talked to her, because she was our team mom at the time that transition and that accident happened. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't.
And and she told me later that George Monty sat me down and talked me through the the conflict that she had, because she had an obligation to me and to you and to all our friends, and she was dealing with my dad. Yeah.
Man.
So that's you know, the older and the wiser I get, the bigger of a deal I realize that was. Like that's I don't even know how deep they went in the conversation or what was said, but it was enough that she told me about it.
Yeah.
And I know that it's enough, whether it was 10 seconds or 10 minutes or a couple hours, that without it things might have been different, you know, because like I didn't have to quit baseball when everything happened. Like luckily my other, family members stepped in, make sure I got where I needed to go. And if I couldn't be there or my mom couldn't be there, your dad knew what was up and understood, right? Like that's a huge thing.
Do you know my dad's gonna call me and be like, "See, George, I told you. Do you know how lucky you are, George?" No, and I'm endure like a 30-minute phone call of like, "Friends, respectful, George." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, thank you
yeah.
for.
I mean, there are moments like that, and they're just moments, and you don't if you're not paying attention, you don't realize that they could be pivotal, major, moments where everything happens for a reason. I think
Yeah,
everything everything happens for a reason, but you also have the ability to make things happen or to dictate where things go. But there's also moments in time where opportunities present themselves for you to make those choices, and that's one of them.
yeah.
Like,
That's well,
your dad was a really big role model during that year, whether he knew it or not. For me, that's heavy.
dude, that's it's mind blowing. I was lucky in that my parents got divorced when I was younger, but they both were such they both went out of their ways to help create an awesome life. My mom got remarried and she married this guy that was he was equally impressive and had so much stuff. But my dad, he was always the coach. And you
Mm-hmm.
realize this until you become older, but like he gave up. Like we had a lot of financial problems as well, but my dad made sure that he was at every practice. He was the coach. And like I have so many friends that have I remember being little and my friends being like, "Your dad's so awesome, George. Your dad's so awesome." And it's man, you're gonna make me cry. But when you tell me that story, you know what I mean? Like that is awesome, and I love him, and I didn't know that he did that for you or your family, and I'm thankful to hear that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I I had for I hadn't remembered that or thought about that until like I think last night when we finally set a time and said, all
Right,
right, we've been talking about this for like a month or two.
right,
But last night we were like, let's do it tomorrow. We're doing it.
yeah,
And then I started thinking like last night I had that thought, wow, like not like I remember we would hang out in high school with our circle of friends. Like every morning we'd meet up and we'd all have breakfast together.
yep,
Like there was like a third period break where we would all hang out and have breakfast.
right,
Yeah. And we were thought we were cool, like old people drinking coffee and like there was like a good 10 or 12 of us every morning. We'd hang out and meet up for breakfast.
yep,
And that's the memory that like I have when I see your name on Facebook or whatever, or you message me or I message you. That's like the obvious memory.
yeah,
And then last night I thought about it. I was like, wow, like wait a minute. Not only do I remember George from high school, like you're one of my oldest friends. Like we go way further back. We go back like first or second grade, I think. Right? Like, and then I thought, wow, wait, we played baseball. Not, I mean, we all our friends played baseball together, but
right,
we were on the same team. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, your dad was our coach. And then, like, all of this
yeah,
hit me last night,
yeah,
including the story about him and my mom.
yeah,
Like, I don't know if you remember, but like, I was I was the only kid I think whose parents were still together and still alive, but only one of my parents ever came to my baseball games, and people don't know why.
Right.
That's why, because
Yeah.
my dad was either in a hospital or in a rehab. You know, that's why at that time. There were
Right.
other times when he wasn't there, and that was a whole different thing because he was, he was also an alcoholic. So,
Right.
you know, but my mom was always there,
Yeah.
always. And me
Yeah.
and my dad are cool. Like the work that I put in allowed, and he's put in work too, like for sure. But for me, I had to put in my own work to make peace with him.
Yeah. Of course.
Because he's a dad. Like, even at his worst, even if he didn't know how to show it, he still loved me.
Sure.
Teenage me, I couldn't say that about him. I couldn't say that I loved him, and I didn't. We were not that type of family anyway. We
Right.
never said I loved you. We never hugged. We
Right.
never did any of that stuff. But and I'm not proud of this, but like, I was well into my 20s before I ever said I love you to my dad. So what we're talking about now in the past, I'm not here to like, point the finger or anything. It's the truth.
Yeah.
That's all it is. But I have to point those things out so that I have to point those things out so that hopefully through talking to friends like you or people that need to hear these things, that maybe I have something, to offer them that might help them get through their stuff,
Yeah.
you know? Because
Absolutely.
again, going full circle, talking about how we got to this point where I'm living the life that I want to live, and telling you that I had to get through certain things that I started learning in my teenage years. And now that's my life. My life is not music. Music is something I do, but my life is making life better for me and the people around me. Like, my goal now, I have music goals still. Like, I haven't accomplished everything I want to accomplish, but like, my goal now is to do my best that every person that I make eye contact with, open a door for at the grocery store, or hang out with, like, somehow I want to make everybody's life a little easier or better at the moment that I'm in their vicinity.
That's beautiful. Like, I
Like,
think a
that's
better world is the only way to make the world better is to make everyone around you better. That's the
yeah,
goal.
yeah. And what you said about basically being a mirror, which we all are.
Yeah.
That's what we all are. Um, that's my, like, that's where I'm putting more of my work. My work is on being that person. You know, I still spend plenty of hours, making music and practicing and writing and recording, but I spend as many or more on the other stuff. You know.
It blows my mind as I'm sitting here and we're having this conversation. And previously we had talked about, you know, what you used to do as far as going out and traveling, and then the COVID kind of hit, and then picking up this new style of music. It's organic, and you're changing. And then, with the last piece you just told me about your philosophy of making the world better, it seems like that's the direction your music is going in. Just because if that's your thought process about doing that, that's probably going to be reflected in the upcoming music. And it makes me excited to kind of hear it.
Yeah, I've always had it in there in the music.
Right.
It's been there all along, but I feel like uh, I'm consciously being less guarded with how I wrap it in the poetry.
That's beautiful.
Because you can hide things in poetry. You can say some really heavy stuff, knowing that it's wrapped in this wording that it's so not obvious that I don't have to be as self-conscious about putting it out there.
Kind of hiding behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the only thing I always said was, if I'm gonna express a concern or a complaint in a song, there's gonna be a resolution in the song somewhere.
Wow,
Be,
that is awesome.
So because I don't ever want to be a complainer about anything, you
Right.
know, and I don't ever want to be a naysayer or feel like, you know, we're doomed
Yeah.
with whatever the situation or uh, whatever the you know, I don't know what I'm lost for words, but whatever the topic is, I don't want to just complain or write it off and then not offer a solution.
Yeah.
So even in the older material, there's always a solution. There's always some kind of resolution. But yeah, I think the new songs are a little more obvious as far as what I'm trying to convey.
Nice.
Less less poetry in the turning of phrases and more poetry in saying plainly but musically what I want to say.
Yeah, it's such a powerful medium, and when I think about communicating and I think about language, so many of us, and I'm guilty of this as well. So many of us, instead of listening to what someone says, we're thinking of what to say while the other person's talking,
You're right.
and you lose so much connection. You lose so much humanity. You lose so much potential to solve problems when you don't give the conversation the attention that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a dance. It's like, okay, this person goes and this person goes, and they can move together. And
Here's one for you, like getting away from music to explain the music. Talking about people you've been reading. One of the people I've been reading and listening to is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's done a lot of work on the the electrical system, the mind and body connection, and understanding that if you correlate us to like a computer, our systems can and are constantly being programmed by our environment, our thoughts, our brain. Like our brain is not us, right? It's this other thing that we can choose to be controlled by or control. So there's and there's science. Joe Dispenza is the guy that's on the forefront of putting science to the theories. So he's he's showing through science that the mind body soul connection is absolutely true. The things you say have chemical and electrical effects on your body immediately, and music being one of those. So we know that our cells and our atoms and everything is constantly in motion and in regeneration. You're not the same person you were yesterday or the day before, literally and figuratively, right? So your your programming comes from, like, you have your physical voice, you have that voice in your head. It's usually the one that's like very very self-conscious. Then you have that other voice that's like, I know that's not true, even though I think it. You have like multiple voices, and you have multiple consciousness, levels of consciousness. And so what he's been doing is putting scientific proof to all those things. So we know that me having this conversation with you is going to make my day better than if I had this conversation with somebody where we were talking about things we didn't like
right,
or didn't believe in.
right,
Even if we weren't angry or upset, we were just talking about things we don't like.
yeah,
Our day is not the rest of our day is not going to be as good as if you and I are talking about the good old days
yeah,
or talking about health and healing.
yeah,
Like, and it might be on a minute level that you don't consciously recognize. You might just think, oh, that's just what that's out there, it's BS or whatever. Like, but it's there, it's real. And so if you're not feeling it and you're not recognizing it, then maybe you're not doing it enough. So if you want people to recognize it and you want people to understand it, then you've got to do it more, and you've got to do it all the time. And so I have to do it through my art as well as through my conversation or my interactions with people. And I'm not great at it. I don't nail it every day. Some days I make people's days worse, and I'm sorry, but like I don't try to,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so the upside for me is that music. I'm lucky to have an audience, and I'm really lucky to have a pretty good size audience.
Yeah.
Like I've sold records from Japan to Australia to the UK, like all over. Like I'm really lucky, but I feel like maybe on some level, even though the music has always been honest and from the heart and totally me, I feel like now I'm learning that I there's still a lot more to give. Not just more music, but more intent in the music.
Yeah.
Like more substance, you know? And so I'm way more conscious of it today than I was yesterday, and I'll be more conscious of it tomorrow. So and it's not music necessarily with a message, or I'm not preaching to anybody. I'm just trying to relate to people. You know, if the music is the food, it's getting more and more potent with nutrients and micronutrients and vitamins and minerals,
Right.
you know, so that every bite doesn't have to be bigger for you to get more from it.
Right.
You can take the same size bites and you're gonna feel better and better, hopefully, or relate more on a deeper level with what you're getting. So you're getting, you know, hopefully you're getting more for your dollar, you know, in that way. Um, but yeah, man, like again, just trying to answer your question and like come full circle with these long answers, but that's my goal, you know. The music is my voice. I'm lucky that I love to do it and that I have an audience. So thank you for giving me another one.
Man, I'm learning a lot, and it's that is it's truly amazing to think about language that way. I've been sharing some ideas about language, and it's okay. So when I think about language and music and communicating, one part I don't like about language is like user agreements and contracts and like ambiguous language that pretends to get you out of stuff, but like you get insurance, like they have all these things. We're going to protect you from all this stuff unless there's an act of God. There's always like
Right.
weak words and all these words to wiggle your way out of stuff. And wouldn't it be a better world if user agreements and contracts were written in poetry or in song? If you had to sing the user agreement, you would have to make a structure so that it flowed together. You know what I mean? I think the world would be
well,
a better place.
well, if nothing else, people would actually read them.
Oh!
You know, right? Like how many of us are just like, we don't have time for this. This is ridiculous, and it's the print is too small anyway. You know, so at least people would at least probably give them more attention.
Could you imagine
Um,
user agreements if you had an artist perform the user agreement for Google or Facebook? Hey, this is our new people would tune in to listen to the user agreement. You know what I mean? You could
you know, it's funny is yesterday evening we were sitting on the beach in Morro Bay in California, and I'm sitting there picking my guitar, and this guy comes up and he goes, "Hey, can I join you?" And that's always like a sketchy
yeah.
situation. You're like, you know, I don't know if it's like drunk homeless harmonica guy or like, and that's cool too. It's always entertaining, but like you never know what you're getting into. And so the guy sits down and we play, and he's pretty good, and we're hanging out, and he turns out to be a super cool dude. And but just to connect it to what you're talking about, he works for Snapchat. So maybe we could get your idea, like bring it to life.
Dude, I'm telling you, talk to that guy, make
Okay.
it, and dude, you guys will be famous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'll be playing parties. And think about it. Like, if you could make this part of life that no one likes into something that people do like, now you're really making the world a better place. You've taken something dry and weak and no one reads. And not only would it make it more interesting, but you would probably make it better because if you could put some sarcastic lyrics into like, gotta sign this thing, sign your life away, or however you would word it, you know what I mean? And then that would make people actually think about what they're signing. Or you could fundamentally change the way people see contracts by changing the way in which they were played. Not the right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like perceived.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that guy. Make that happen.
yeah. We should start a band called The Contracts, and we'll make an album called User Agreements.
You would start your like there's country music, rap music, and then there's contract music.
There you go. Our own genre.
The own genre.
Yeah, that'd
You know,
be awesome.
it's on a related story. I listened to Ice T a while back, and that guy is so. I really like that guy. He made this what seemed like an outrageous claim. So I'll say the claim, and then I'll tell you how he explained it. Because the claim on its face sounds crazy, but he says, rap music and country music, and this goes back to what you said about folk music. He's like hardcore rap music and country music are like the exact same thing.
Yeah,
And
I've heard that. I've heard that quote.
yeah, and you're like, what are you talking about? He's like, listen, man, they're talking about their dogs, they're talking about their trucks, And I was like, when you step back and you look at it, both genres of music are talking about their love, their life, their the things in there, what you have, where you're at, the place to be. Like it's the same substance, but just in a different dialogue, if that kind of makes sense.
You know, what's hilarious is I just like within the last month read a quote from Bob Dylan. Or no, I think I saw an interview with him, and he was always heralded as the voice of his generation.
Right.
And they asked him, well, like, you're still here, but is there a new you? And you know what he said? He said something like, it was somebody. It was like, yeah, it's like the guys in the Wu-Tang Clan, or like he named some hip hop artists, but he named like the real shit, not like
Okay.
it wasn't like, I don't know, whoever's on the radio or whatever. Like he went deep and he knew what he was talking about, and he's like, that's the new me. He's like, it's not another kid with a guitar and a harmonica. It's those dudes.
It's so true. I mean, that's someone who's an artist who can see himself in another artist.
Yeah, and that's like an 83-year-old man. That's in tune with what's happening. That's cool.
Like that interview should be played all over TV. Like we need more of that right now. Like here's this old guy that is an artist in one way, and he's saying, hey, here's these other guys. Like that's the wisdom of our fathers that we're missing in the community. That is, I like that interview. I'm gonna have to look that up. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, and Dylan just released an album like 2 weeks ago. That's great.
Is
He's
it really?
still that good. So he's not out of touch, or he's not like over the hill, or like any of that stuff. And now that I think about it, he wrote a memoir uh, called, I think, The Chronicles.
Okay.
And actually, he may have written what I just told you in that book. It might not have been from a live interview. So it might actually be in print in that book. So I'd recommend reading it.
Yeah, I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah, there's tons of cool stuff out there that helps me kind of direct whatever course I'm on, whether
Yeah,
it's musical or not. It still helps the music.
absolutely.
That's one of the things that I try to make everything count. Like even if I go run 10 miles in the mountains, which is something I love to do. I love to trail run. So um, if I go do that, it's not just because I want to look better or get skinnier, or that running helps me be the better person, that helps me make the music. Like it's all connected.
Right.
And I do that with the conscious purpose of it. It has to, for me, it has to cover all those bases, or it's not worth doing. I could be doing something better with my time.
Yeah.
So like if I go, like I'm probably going to do it after this. I'm probably going to go eat, and then I'm going to probably go skateboard somewhere.
Nice.
My skateboarding has intention that it's adding to. I need that to get to where I need to be here, or in the heart, or wherever, so that I treat my girlfriend better, or that I write a good song, or I make a stranger's day better. Like I
Yeah.
don't do it. I don't do anything just to do it. I just make what I do count and have substance, especially skateboarding. Because as a kid, we were told how we shouldn't do it, how it was a waste of time. Like
Right.
You know, like my skateboards would disappear from the house because they didn't want me doing it.
Right.
At least my dad didn't. My mom was cool, but they did. My mom understood that it was part of the whole. You
Mm.
know, I wasn't out break. Even when I got arrested for doing it, I didn't get in trouble from her. I carried that with me where I'm not going to waste my time doing things that don't make the whole better or more productive, even if somebody thinks that what I'm doing is silly.
Yeah.
You
It
know?
it I think it's a great philosophy to live your life by, and I think it drives home the point. What you do sometimes, you do all the time. And one way I have seen the exact same thing in my life is that, like, at my work, like, there's a lot of guys. Like, I care about everybody there, even the people that I fight with. Like, I care about them. I want them to be better. And there's some people that take a. There's sometimes in life there's a lot of argumentation. And what I try to tell people, is, let's say you're at work and you get into an argument. You got to remember that the purpose, what's the purpose of an argument? The purpose of an argument is to solve a problem, not to
Yeah.
win. We're so worried about being wrong. You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to lose. No one wants to be wrong. You develop strategies to win arguments. And they're getting to solving the problem. They're just winning the argument. So if you get really good at winning the argument, all of a sudden you're not at work anymore. You're at home. Now you have a strategy for your family, your wife, your kids, your friends.
Right.
You're distancing yourself from solving problems. So I would agree that you should have intent and try to be mindful on your daily routine, what you're doing has purpose, and then it is part of the whole.
Yeah. I was reading a book last night, but are you familiar with Wayne Dyer?
Yeah, yeah, I am.
He was there in Hawaii until he passed away. But I read basically what you just said. Like you need to disassociate or detach yourself from the need to be right if you want to connect with the source.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that's a phenomenal point.
it's impossible to 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 get to that point where you feel centered and present if you have attachments to things like being right.
Yeah, that's the fundamental tenet of Buddhism is attachment, right? Like you,
Right.
uh,
That's one of the things. That's one of the things I picked up. Like I said, when I started this as a teenager, is I would just grab books on all this stuff that I could find,
yeah,
and it started with like, you know, the Tao and Buddhism and Eastern philosophy,
yeah,
and and you know, that's not to say those are the answers, but everybody needs to start somewhere, and the answer is not one thing or from one source. It's from all the sources that you can absorb and kind of mold in your being and then put back out into the world. So if one doesn't work, try another one. You know, if one doesn't resonate with you, try another one. And what I found is once I found one, I would find the next one. And
yeah,
then I'd find the next one. And
yeah.
then sometimes the next one was one that I tried years ago and wrote off as not the one.
So
And
true.
all that really happened was I realized at the time that I found it originally, I just wasn't ready for it.
Yeah,
So you just find your way in. You find that first step, and then you just keep taking steps.
yeah.
You
That's
know?
poetry in motion, man. It,
Yeah, I hope so. I like it works for me, and it works for I see it work for the people around me in the sense that when I'm present and focused and aware, my relationships with the people around me on any given day are better. You know,
yeah,
the people around me are in better moods. They're they're more carefree. They're more focused. You know, and it's not because I made them that way. It's just I didn't. I know that I didn't. I did my part to not detract from their presence or their energy.
yeah.
You know, I can't give anybody my energy, but I can certainly take from theirs.
Right.
That's easy to do. You know, just go into work in a shitty mood,
Yeah,
and the whole room, you can just suck the energy right out of a room, easy.
yeah.
But try to make one person's day better. It's a little more complicated.
Right. But way more rewarding.
Way more rewarding, and way more addictive,
Yeah.
or maybe not addictive. Way more. Oh, what's the word? Uh, I'm looking for the word where like, it becomes a domino effect. Like you reach that one person and they reach somebody, and it
Right.
multiplies.
Exponential, I think.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, like it becomes exponential, and it's because you're doing it together with
Right.
the other people. It's
Right.
not. It can't be one person. One person can ruin it, but one person can't fix it.
Yeah.
But they can fix themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what has to happen. You know, um, like people are really vulnerable and very concerned and on edge right now with the way that like the world is.
Yeah.
But it really the world hasn't changed all that much.
Only we.
Like yeah, like the current events of the day are no more or less intense or scary than they were all along.
Right.
Like I still feel in when I close my eyes, if I don't look in a mirror or look at myself on the camera staring back at me right now, I still think I'm like 17 years old. My body feels better than it did when I was 17, even though I was an athlete as a kid and in good shape. I'm way healthier now and in way better shape. And when I go ride my skateboard, I have way less aches and pains. I have none. I have none anymore. I have better range of motion. Like everything about me feels better and younger at 44 than it did at 17, including my mental state, emotional state. But I guess the point is, with regards to what we're talking about, is that is there for everybody. Like the source, the creator, the creation, whatever this life is, all of that is available to all of us all the time, and there's always more. It's an infinite source. And when we look at like things that are going on in the world, whatever side of the coin you're on, or if there's many sides, none of it matters. None of it. And it's always been there. Think of all the moments, like our parents grew up with the Vietnam War and JFK and
Right.
Martin Luther King. We've grown up with just as many or more major current events than they did in a shorter time.
Yeah.
We've lived through some shit.
Yeah. A lot.
Like, so what's going on now is it's only different, but it's been there all along. So for me, there's no excuse to not continue the work to make myself better so that I can make somebody else's day better. Because now's a perfect time to say screw it and just go hide in the cave. and most people would understand and say, you know what, I get it. I would do that too if I could.
Right.
So if you look at it, objectively, you realize, like, for me, that's not an option. That's not an excuse, because nothing's really changed. It really hasn't. It's just there's just different faces to the problems. And I don't know. This is one of those intuitive things, but as a kid, like, I always knew, like, the answer wasn't in religion. It wasn't in politics. It wasn't in any of that stuff that we as humans. That stuff's all fake. We created that stuff. It's real to people, and I respect that. But in the grand scheme of things, when this earth and us and animals and ecosystems were created, those things weren't. Those were created by us,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
so to get involved in those things and choose sides is really unhealthy. The answers don't lie there. To me, the answers lie in, making your day better if I can. Going to the grocery store and maybe opening a door for somebody. Like
Yeah.
something as simple as that. Like I don't have to give a homeless person money to make their day better. you know, and if I have some, maybe I'll give it to them. Most cases, I probably don't, and I'm not lying to them when I tell them I don't.
Yeah.
But I can still make their day at least a little better.
Yeah.
And people that live in a neighborhood with neighbors on both sides of them, which I don't live like that, but people that do, and most people do, just think about how disconnected most people are from their neighbors.
Yeah.
I know that they are, because when I go to visit friends or family that have that lifestyle, they've lived next door to the same people for years or decades, and they don't know anything about them.
It's tragic.
Yeah. So like how is that issue not more important than a political issue that involves a few chosen people in a different world that don't listen to us anyway?
Right.
Like, we would be way more effective, in my opinion, as a society if we just treated everybody that we come in contact with better.
Right.
So, none of what's going on outside of my bubble, it doesn't affect me until it affects me. And so worrying about it puts 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 the concept of time to it,
Mm.
which puts it basically in the future, which means stress comes from worrying about the future.
Right.
If I just sit here now with you and look around, there's no worries, there's no stress, there's no sickness, you know. And if we go back and talk about the past in the context that you and I are talking about it, that's one thing. But if I go back to the past and all I do is think about it in the sense of remembering those emotions and those feelings from growing up at that time in those circumstances, then I'd be really miserable right now.
Yeah.
You know, time goes with religion and politics for me. It's made up. It's not real.
Right.
Months, weeks, days of the month. That's not real. There's not a calendar on the sun or the moon that was created with us. That was our doing. And so that concept of time is unhealthy for me. You know, if it's something that other people need or crave or whatever, that's cool. Like, I can still be their friend. If somebody is a political supporter on any side, and I don't associate or agree or any or whatever, or even if I disagree with them, I can still be their friend. I can still make their day better.
Right.
I can still be a source of something productive or like nutritious,
Right.
to their life.
Right.
So I guess that's that's my focus right now in life, and I foresee it being only I foresee that only becoming more important to me, and if I can help somebody along the way, then I feel like I'm doing something. I'm doing something right because I feel that I am, not because there's a scoreboard somewhere. You know.
Yeah. I heard a story one time about gosh, this was the I forgot his name. He's like the winningest basketball coach of all time in college.
John Wooden.
John Wooden. Okay, so
I played I played basketball, so I learned my history about that too.
okay, so John Wooden, you know, he I read his biography, and in his biography he says they talk about winning in life and stuff, and they asked John Wooden, like, what is it like? What do you teach these kids? You've won, 11 out of 13, 7 in a row. The next closest person has won like 3 or 4. What is it? And he gave the speech, and what he says is, here's what I tell the kids. There's a real simple thing I want all you kids to know. At the end of the day, only you will truly know whether you won or lost out there. It won't be
Right.
based on the points on the board, because you can go out there and you can play the best game of your life, and if you have less points on the scoreboard, but you gave your all, then you get to walk away the winner because you got
Yep.
more out of yourself, and on the flip side of that, if you go out there and you just kind of lollygag and you don't play your best and you still win, well, then you're a loser. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You gave up. You didn't get out of yourself. You failed to get out of yourself. And then the hook was, what in life, what you give, you get to keep. But what you fail to give, you lose forever.
Yep.
You know, and
Yeah.
it's profound, man.
Yeah. And go back to your old man. Like, he was one of the few that didn't. It wasn't a big deal how good we were, right? Like, it didn't matter if we were good baseball players or a good baseball team, if we won or lost. He treated us with respect and care no matter what. And I played baseball from t-ball, like 4 years old, all the way up to high school. And your dad and one other coach, those are the only two I can say that about. Out of,
Right,
between coaches and assistant coaches,
right,
20 dudes.
easy.
There were plenty of episodes where you saw parents and coaches cursing and throwing fits in front of the kids and the parents.
Yeah,
Or
a
do
lot.
you ever remember seeing kids get pulled off the field by their angry parents because they hated the coach
Yep,
during
yep,
games
yep. I
in
remember.
front of everybody, and
Yep,
the shame that those kids had to go through?
yep.
And they were good kids. They
Yeah,
didn't, and their parents were just so misguided.
right.
So yeah, credit again to your old man.
Yeah, he really preached mental toughness. He all the time is like, listen, you can't. It's all in here, George. What you put in life, you're gonna get out of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is you do it your style. Don't
Yep.
worry about that stuff. He's like, you can't lose. All you can do is get better. You know,
Right.
and, the goal of life is to be defeated by ever bigger things.
Right.
But yeah, it's an interesting relationship, and as two young men having similar, having similar things. I think all young men, you get to a point where you have to fight your dad, not
Mm-hmm.
physically, but you have to mentally. Like that's why you challenge your dad. That's why you don't
Right.
like, why you hate him. Like you get to this point where you gotta beat him, so that, and when you get older, you learn that you were fighting, but your dad was never fighting. You know what I mean?
No.
He was trying
Right.
to teach you, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so sad because you don't realize till you get older, and hopefully your parents are still around when you get older, and then you can actually get to meet your parents on a level that is not,
They're
father son,
they're
but
they're just people.
yeah, yes, thank you.
Yeah. 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 Like I said earlier, like if you want to talk on a parenting level, at a childhood level, I don't have a lot of nice things to say, but having made peace and getting to where I am now, like the things that I've learned about how my parents grew up,
Right,
especially my dad,
yeah,
he had it way worse than he ever gave it to me,
yeah,
and I got it pretty bad.
right,
And so now that we're cool, we're buddies. Like, I love him. He's awesome. Um, but like now, like the things here's one. Before I say this, here's something I'll put out there, and I hope not to. If he's watching, I hope not to embarrass him. But he grew up as an alcoholic. I mean, and he has admitted to me, like, he was already full blown. When we were in like sixth, seventh grade, and we were skateboarding, and we were probably doing some stuff that adults do, right? I mean, I was.
guaranteed,
Yeah,
guaranteed,
but we at least me. I know some of our friends weren't so lucky, but I never had a problem with it. I
right,
never got in trouble for it.
right,
It was something. It was fun. I know that my old man, by the time he was in seventh grade, or somewhere in that age, like 11, 12 years old, was
right,
already a full blown alcoholic, like a habitual alcoholic. So I also know now that they say that people that live through alcoholism, um, it kind of stunts their growth.
it's true,
So if you're an alcoholic by 12, 13 years old, and you're 50 years old or 60 years old, on some or many levels, you're still only 12 or 13 years old.
yeah,
So when I say my dad in some ways is still like a 12 or 13-year-old at like 64, 65 years old, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. What I'm saying is I've gotten to the point where I can recognize and have empathy and also relate to him because we've gotten past the problem stage. He's sober, and so we can actually communicate. And we never could communicate when I was younger because we were fighting.
Right.
You know, so what you're saying about like, you know, fighting your parents and going through that whole thing, everybody pretty much does.
You have to.
I know now. I know now that. Well, I know now that you actually don't have to. But chances are you're probably going to,
Right. Right.
unless you're lucky enough to find the path that, you know, I started finding it when I was like 16, 17, and I'm still learning how to follow it and stay on it. So it's not a overnight thing. For me, it was not overnight. It wasn't easy. But there's some people out there that they might find it when they're 8 or 9 years old, and they might never have to veer off of it. And God bless them. Good for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're one of the people that doesn't find it early, or you find it early and you feel like you found it and were on it and you failed, get back on it. It's don't if you find that you fail, you're not a failure.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was a point where I went from being like a young, happy, talkative kid to somebody that didn't like people and wouldn't talk to anybody for a long time. And so I feel like I'm getting back to being that kid where I can be anybody and everybody's friend.
Right.
And somewhere in those high school years and all through, you know, through a good portion of my early 20s and 30s, that wasn't true anymore. Even as a person in the public eye of some sort as a musician, I was never dishonest on stage or in my music, but I also didn't give any more than I had to when it came time to get off stage and interact with people. You know, I really shortchanged a lot of people on a level where I wasn't mean or, you know, rude or any, maybe to some people they thought I was, but I was really just not connecting and
Right.
not, you know, making, um, not making that personal contact with people.
Right.
And that was just, you know, the scars or the pre-programming that happened that as I figured it out, I started to address it. And now I'm getting back to where like I can just walk up to any old stranger and make conversation and not feel weird, you know,
Right.
and feel like even after spending just 30 seconds with somebody, like being able to sense who they are and I can call them a friend,
Yeah.
even if I don't ever talk to them again, you know? Um, so like coming to come full circle with the interview and talking with you,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be my 5-year-old self with regards to like how I handle the world around me and the people around me. Because when I was that age, you know, I used to get in trouble in school for being too friendly and talking too much. Whereas later in my school years, I used to get in trouble for not engaging enough and not interacting enough and not participating.
Right.
Because a lot of that was just like, you know, it was beaten out of me in one way or another.
Yeah.
Whether it was verbally or physically or whatever, like it was just you know, it got to the point where I was starting to break. And
Yeah.
luckily, I don't think I ever fully broke, but I got close enough, and my mom recognized it soon enough that I was able to, you know, because intuitively we all know if we're not giving our best, we all know
Sure.
if we are not truly happy,
Right.
we all know.
Yeah.
That's why people turn to drugs and alcohol, and the people that are on it talk all that noise about, oh, you're just a square, you're not having fun. They know the truth.
Right.
They know that they're doing it because they're not having fun. To put it plain and simple, I'm trying to be my 5-year-old self and be childlike at 44 where I want to be a shining light to people I know and love and to strangers. And that's it. It's simple. It's once you figure it out, you realize how simple it was and how it was only difficult to get there because I made it difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like on some level you have to be broken so you can be built.
Yeah.
Right.
And the trick is to, you know, one of the things I had to learn was forgiveness. And one of the things I didn't know that I had to learn was forgiving myself.
Wow.
Even because at the time I was like, I have every right to be angry. I didn't do anything wrong. And I was right. But all that anger only hurt me. It didn't hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, unless I acted on it, then it did.
Yeah. It's like, what do they say about like anger? It's like swallowing a poison pill. Like you're gonna take the poison when you want to hurt somebody else. I forgot how the quote goes. It's way more elegant.
Yeah, there's a comedian. There's a comedian that made good light of it too. That's hilarious, and I'll try to find that and send it to you.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah. So I feel like we could do a few versions or a few volumes of these.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next, maybe at some point in time, we'll have you bring your guitar down and you can bang out a song or something.
yeah, my battery's about to die, so I don't even think I'll have time to do that now. But let's do some more if people are
Absolutely.
digging it.
Yeah, you know what, man? I love you, buddy. It's super awesome to talk to you. Thank you for spending time with all of us today. And
Yeah, man.
we'll do it again soon, man. And I'll touch base with you a little bit later today and go over some editing and stuff.
Right on. I love you too, man. It's